Could well be the case, and we have had examples to date where that has been the case. Look, our previous examples of where we have these very focused programs to bring in investors, to bring in companies who have an interest in basing themselves here, have brought in hundreds of millions in terms of wider benefits. And so that is what we want to seek here, is the opportunity to leverage New Zealand's unique position to the benefit of New Zealanders.
How significant is it that we're now in a position to start loosening those border criteria a bit?
It is significant. You've seen from some of the changes I've outlined already, we have been iteratively moving through and widening up those where people have a direct and immediate need to enter New Zealand who might otherwise not have been caught by being citizens, permanent residents, or, for instance, having partnership visas. So that means those who are ordinarily residents, there's a particular group there who have connection to New Zealand that we've been working on, those who are partners that we've been working on, and now, beyond that, we're looking to open up to about 1,400 a month who would sit more broadly beyond that criteria. We have been increasing capacity, and at the same time as increasing capacity, we've also seen a bit of change in demand from New Zealanders looking to come back, as you would expect over time. What we do need to carefully balance, though, and this is one of the things that we are continuing to work through, is the kind of a logistical arrangements needed to constantly assure New Zealanders they have a place in quarantine should they choose to come home, whilst at the same time managing those who, for other economic reasons, we want to allow a place for.
If we do open the borders a crack, we do open ourselves up to more risk, though, don't we?
Oh, no, we are absolutely assured that our quarantine regime, first and foremost, is for the safety of New Zealanders. So nothing changes there. And despite a huge amount of pressure, we have continued to maintain quarantine is a must. Our rigorous regime is a must, and even this quota will operate within that rigorous regime.
Prime Minister, how good a deal is the current MIQ system? The government's paying billions and billions of dollars to hotels that have no other market. What steps will you be taking to renegotiate contracts and deals with the MIQ facilities to provide?
And of course, as you can imagine, early on, that was something very much in our thinking. We were utilising resource facilities that were otherwise underutilised. We have seen pick up in some of the domestic market. So there have been, as I understand, some facilities that have opted to go back towards domestic tourism. But it is fair to say that this is reaping a bit of additional payoff in the sense that we are keeping people employed in these roles. They are facilities that are otherwise underutilised, and we're able to use them for purposes that benefit us. Keep in mind, quarantine facilities do need to be very particular. We need safe distances between people as they enter in facilities. We need bathroom facilities all separated. We need them to be able to run safely. That's why we're very particular about the facilities we use. Building something bespoke would cost a lot of time, a lot of money, and of course we all have the aspiration that sometime in the next year we'll be seeing a lesser need for these quarantine because we'll have treatments and vaccines coming in the market.
Would you expect
I'll come here and then to
So does this relaxing mean that we start looking at international students, if that's the same criteria that you're allowing other workers?
Look, that we are ready and willing to have a conversation within that 10% around the international student market. It is fair to say, though, it could not accommodate the totality, because that was the equivalent of tens of thousands of individuals. But there are those who, for instance, are working in the postgraduate environment where there is additional extra justification for wanting to gain access, and we will work through that with our education institutions as well.
Create a lot of competition, though, from all of those institutions who are desperate to get students back on about exactly.
It doesn't stop the conversations we're having around bespoke quarantine with those institutions as well.
How are they going? Has there been any progress on them being able to convince you that they could actually do it?
Well, we've kept those conversations going. We've been clear that it wouldn't be in this calendar year for education facilities, but it is something Minister Hipkins has had an ongoing conversation around.
How many people are you anticipating coming under the investment strategy, and which countries would they be coming from?
At the moment, that attraction strategy isn't just about people. It is about domiciling companies here, the potential to employ New Zealanders within those opportunities. Some of those conversations are already underway, but are commercially sensitive, so I won't speak to them too much. But in some cases, they may be small. In some cases, they may be larger, but employ New Zealanders. We haven't made a direct allocation within that 10% quota, but what we have done is fund those within the Ministry for Business and Innovation to start doing that outreach work, given the number of inquiries we have already had.
Are we going to see more of those kind of Silicon Valley doomsday preppers coming to New Zealand?
Oh, look, if it is a situation where it's an entity where there is a direct benefit to New Zealand, then that's where we should be having that conversation. For instance, Microsoft, the investment they're making here, a good example of where we can derive extra value for New Zealand companies and New Zealanders.
Today to the debt that the government is borrowing and the potential burden on future generations. What's your message to young people who are going to be able to have to, deal with this in future years, and the responsibility that you'll take it not to overly burden?
And we have taken on that responsibility. And the reference to debt, you'll see that, of course, that has gone directly into the retention of jobs, making sure that we are investing in our people to retrain. We are trying to reduce the economic scarring that an event like this can have on future generations. So there is a balance to be struck here. On the one hand, we need to invest in their future, make sure they have those opportunities, at the same time as keeping a lid and control on debt so they're equally not burdened in the future with paying it back. Into electric vehicles. It is one part of a much wider strategy, and I do think we need to keep in mind in terms of our emissions profile, yes, transport is very important, but so is industrial energy use, and so is the way that we, of course, generate electricity for the grid.
How will you address the prohibitive upfront costs of electric vehicles?
Well, ultimately we will see, as the global market grows, we will see that price come down. But there are a couple of things that are prohibitive. One is the cost of the car. The other is whether or not people get the anxiety that comes with having an EV and not enough charging stations. We've contributed significantly to improving that infrastructure so we can at least overcome that hurdle.
Have you completely abandoned the Big Data scheme?
It isn't part of our policy. Our focus has been on a clean car strategy, and one of the reasons for that is we want to see New Zealand importing cars that cost New Zealanders less to run and emit fewer emissions. So it's not just about EVs. There are much cleaner options out there that just are not being imported into New Zealand, and it means New Zealanders pay the price every time they fill up at the station.
You're out with a couple of your Auckland candidates this afternoon. Do you think you can win Auckland Central?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Obviously, that will be a seat that, as it has many times before, will be closely watched. But I do believe that as the second highest polling candidate in previous elections, that Helen White has a very good chance.
What about Epsom? Do you have any chance of the Wheelers ever winning Epsom?
We always make sure that we have very high quality candidates in Epsom, and that is because we do believe that people of Epsom deserve to have a candidate that they can keenly support without having to get caught up in the MMP politics of it all. She is a fantastic candidate and a very seasoned and experienced lawyer in that field. Equally, we have a number of people who have excellent experience in that field too. In fact, I think we're spoilt for skills and talent within our new intake.
Would you appoint a first-term MP?
Oh, look, I wouldn't rule out scenarios like that. As I've said, though, I don't sit down and predetermine what a future cabinet would look like. That would be very premature, given our focus has to be earning the support of New Zealanders to be back in government and to have that privilege.
So you're not opposed to appointing a first-term MP?
No, I wouldn't be. I wouldn't be opposed to that. But keeping in mind, reflecting on where that's happened before, my recollection would be the likes of Margaret Wilson, I believe, might be an example. So it has happened before, and I wouldn't rule it out. But again, all of that's very premature when you're in the middle of a campaign. All right. Okay. I'll pan around and we'll take a last sports question here. Yep.
Talking about the sport, Australia has scooped the Rugby Championship from New Zealand. How disappointed are you about this decision? And also the recent resurgence in COVID in New Zealand, has that obviously played a part in this decision here?
Look, as I understand, I don't believe there's been any official announcement from SANZA on their decision. However, if that is the outcome, then I would be deeply disappointed. We put in a huge amount of effort into that bid, worked really hard to accommodate the needs of the tournament and the players, even creating a regime where they could be training within 3 days of arrival in New Zealand. If we are not successful, I'd say it would be a result of being caught up in SANZA politics.
So you would be for these teams training in New Zealand while they're under quarantine?
Yes, so the arrangements that we proposed as part of the bid did include training while in quarantine. We worked very hard with health and the tournament organisers to make it work in a way that looked after people's health and didn't jeopardise the tournament. It would mean they would have been able to train within 3 days of arrival. So as I say, if this decision doesn't go our way, I'd say it would be a result of SANZA politics more than anything else.
Do you have an indication whether the training facilities were up to scratch? Was there any pushback from New Zealand Rugby or negotiations?
Oh look, I'm sure that those would have been things that would have been taken into consideration, but New Zealand has very successfully hosted tournaments of this nature on a larger scale before, and I have every confidence that actually the facilities that we were proposing were up to scratch, and the ability to train within 3 days of arrival was also an important part of that pitch.
You haven't hosted those tournaments during COVID. Australia sort of has. If we are to lose out to Australia, is that an indication maybe the government is being too conservative on
No, I don't believe so. As you can hear from some elements of the bid that I'm sharing with you, we went to considerable effort to, for instance, work through a regime that would allow training from within quarantine to make sure we could look after the players but get them on the field. And so my view is, if we're not successful, it'll be less about that and more about the politics of SANZA.
If you're not successful, what does that mean for future sporting events?
Oh, look, what I will say is what has been helpful is in this process we now have established a really robust regime that will allow sporting codes to work through how they can have both a quarantine and training arrangement. So I think it will serve us well for future opportunities, and we will be looking for those future opportunities. This is not going to set us back. I do anticipate that we will have other codes that will be looking to come to New Zealand. All right, did it cover off the sporting needs last one?
Quickly, you've spoken a lot about retraining, and retraining was spoken a lot about today. Is it viable for people in Auckland where living costs are so high, if they lose their job, to just go back into training when, it's quite expensive to live in a city like Auckland?
Yes, well, and look, of course, we have a number of social supports that sit around and are focused on the higher living costs that do exist in Auckland. But we're, of course, trying very hard to offset some of those barriers that exist for retraining by making sure that we are removing some of the costs associated with it. So not only are we making it free for apprenticeships, we've made a number of vocational training courses free as well, and they're across a range of subjects. And for those who wish to train on the job so that they're then able to earn while they learn, we're subsidising employers, sometimes up to $16,000, to make sure that they've got more incentive to employ people while they train to help ease some of the living costs for trainees. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Andrew.